The church was filled with laughter, music, and the scent of fresh flowers. Friends and family gathered to witness the wedding of Amanda and Mark. It was supposed to be a day of joy, a new beginning. But for one little girl, it was also a day of uncertainty. Emily, a 10-year-old with big brown eyes and a heart full of emotions, sat quietly in the front row. She wore a pale pink dress, her hands gripping a small piece of paper tightly. No one knew what she had written on it. No one knew what she was about to do. She had been waiting for this moment for months. Ever since her mother, Amanda, told her she was getting married, Emily had been feeling a storm of emotions inside her. She liked Mark. He was kind, patient, and always made her laugh. But deep inside, a question had been growing in her heart, one she was too afraid to ask. As the ceremony started, Emily watched her mother walk down the aisle. She looked beautiful, happier than Emily had seen her in a long time. But something inside Emily felt heavy. She wasn't just watching her mother marry Mark. She was watching her mother step into a new life, one that Emily wasn't sure she belonged in. Mark turned to face Amanda, his love for her clear in his eyes. The officiant spoke of commitment, love, and partnership. But Emily wasn't listening. Her heart was pounding. Then, just as the vows were about to be exchanged, she stood up. The sudden movement caught everyone's attention. The room grew silent. Amanda turned to her daughter, concern flashing in her eyes. Mark looked at Emily, puzzled. Emily took a deep breath and walked forward, her small hands trembling. She stopped in front of Mark and held out the folded note. Mark hesitated, then gently took the paper from her hands. Slowly, he unfolded it. The words on the page were simple, written in uneven, childlike handwriting. "Please adopt me." A hushed gasp spread through the crowd. Amanda covered her mouth, her eyes already filling with tears. Mark stared at the note, his hands shaking slightly. He looked at Emily, his heart aching at the vulnerability in her eyes. He had always cared for her, but he had never realized the depth of her fears, the fear of being left behind, the fear of not truly belonging. He knelt down in front of her, his voice thick with emotion. "Emily, is this what you want?" Tears welled up in her eyes as she nodded. I don't want to be left out. I want us to be a real family." Mark swallowed the lump in his throat. He glanced at Amanda, who was crying softly, her hands pressed against her heart. Then he looked back at Emily and pulled her into a tight hug. "You are my family," he whispered. "I love you like my own. And if you want me to be your dad, then I promise you, I will be." The room was silent for a moment, and then the sound of soft sobs and sniffles filled the space. The love in that moment was more powerful than any vows spoken that day. Amanda knelt beside them, wrapping her arms around both of them. "We are a family, sweetheart. We always will be." The officiant, clearly moved, cleared his throat and smiled. "Well," he said gently, "I believe we have another vow to add today." Mark stood, still holding Emily's hand. He looked at her with complete sincerity. "Emily, I promise to always be here for you, to love you, to protect you, and to be the father you deserve." Emily beamed through her tears. "I love you, Mark." Mark wiped away a tear of his own. "I love you too, sweetheart." The audience erupted in applause. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. What had started as a wedding between two people had turned into something even more beautiful, the official beginning of a family. That day, Mark didn't just gain a wife. He gained a daughter. And Emily? She gained something she had been longing for her whole life, a father who chose her. The ceremony continued, but the atmosphere had completely changed. What was once a formal event now felt deeply personal. More than just a wedding, it was a moment of transformation. As Mark and Amanda exchanged vows, their words carried a new depth, a new meaning. They weren't just promising to love and cherish each other. They were also promising to love and protect Emily, to build a family where she would never feel alone. When the officiant finally announced, "You may now kiss the bride," the room erupted in cheers. But as Mark and Amanda shared their first kiss as husband and wife, Mark did something unexpected. He knelt down and held his arms open for Emily. Without hesitation, Emily ran into his embrace. The guests clapped even louder. some wiping their tears away. The wedding photographer, who had been capturing every moment, realized that this was the most important shot of the day, not just a bride and groom, but a father and daughter embracing for the first time as family. The reception that followed was filled with laughter and warmth. Guests approached Emily, telling. The reception was no longer just a wedding celebration. It had become something more, a true celebration of love and family. Guests came up to Emily one by one, telling her how brave she was, how her words had touched their hearts. Some wiped away tears as they hugged her, while others simply smiled, too moved to speak. Mark stayed close to Emily the whole evening, introducing her to guests not just as Amanda's daughter, but as his daughter too. Each time he said it, Emily felt her heart swell with happiness. When it was time for the first dance, Mark took Amanda's hand, leading her to the dance floor. The soft melody of their chosen song played through the speakers, and they swayed together, lost in each other's love. But then Mark did something that surprised everyone. He turned to Emily and reached out his hand. "May I have this dance?" he asked. Emily's eyes widened in delight. "Me? Of course," Mark said, smiling. "I think this day is just as much about you as it is about us." The room filled with soft murmurs and smiles as Emily took his hand. The music changed to a gentler tune, and Mark twirled her around, making her giggle. Amanda watched them dance, tears in her eyes. She had always dreamed of finding a partner who would love Emily as much as she did, and now, watching Mark with her daughter, she knew she had found exactly that. Later that evening, as the party continued, Mark took Emily aside and handed her a small velvet box. "What's this?" she asked, curiosity shining in her eyes. "Open it," Mark encouraged. Emily carefully lifted the lid and gasped. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small heart pendant. Engraved on the heart were the words, "Forever my daughter." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. "Really?" she whispered. Mark crouched down to her level. "Really," he said firmly. "I meant what I said, Emily. I'm not just marrying your mom. I'm choosing to be your dad. If you'll have me." Emily didn't answer with words. She threw her arms around Mark's neck, holding on as tightly as she could. "I love you, Dad," she whispered for the first time. Mark closed his eyes, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I love you too, sweetheart." Amanda joined them, wrapping her arms around both of them. The three of them stood there, locked in an embrace, as the party continued around them. A few months after the wedding, Mark and Amanda made everything official. They went to the courthouse, where Mark signed the adoption papers, making Emily his legal daughter. When the judge stamped the final papers, he smiled at Emily. "Looks like today's a special day for you, young lady." Emily beamed. "It's the best day ever." Mark ruffled her hair. "It sure is." As they walked out of the courthouse, hand in hand, Emily felt something she had never felt before, a deep, unshakable sense of belonging. She wasn't just a little girl trying to find her place anymore. She was Emily Parker, Mark's daughter, forever. That evening, after the adoption was finalized, Mark, Amanda, and Emily went out for a special dinner. They picked a small family-owned Italian restaurant, Emily's favorite place because of its warm, cozy atmosphere and the delicious spaghetti she loved so much. As they sat at the table, Emily couldn't stop smiling. She kept staring at the official adoption papers Mark had let her hold. Her fingers traced over the words Emily Parker again and again, as if she couldn't believe they were real. "Are you happy, sweetheart?" Amanda asked, watching her daughter with soft eyes. Emily nodded enthusiastically. "I feel different, but in a good way, like I finally know where I belong." Mark reached over and squeezed her hand. "That's because you do. You've always belonged with us, Emily. We just made it official today." Emily grinned and held up the papers. "I'm keeping these forever." Amanda laughed. "We'll frame them when we get home." Just then, their waiter arrived with a surprise, a plate of chocolate cake with 3 forks. "A little something to celebrate your big day," he said with a wink. Emily gasped in delight. "Chocolate cake? This is the best day ever." As they dug into the cake together, Mark watched his daughter. The thought still overwhelmed him in the best way possible. He had gone into this marriage knowing he was gaining a wife, But he never imagined how much love he would feel for Emily. She wasn't just his stepdaughter. She was his child, and he would love her forever. Later that night, back at home, Emily changed into her pajamas and climbed into bed, still holding onto the necklace Mark had given her on their wedding day. As she lay under her blankets, Mark knocked softly on the door. "Mind if I come in?" Emily sat up, smiling. "Of course, Dad." Mark's heart swelled at the word Dad. He would never get tired of hearing it. He walked over and sat on the edge of her bed. "I thought maybe tonight I could read you a bedtime story, if you want." Emily's eyes sparkled. "Really? You've never read me a bedtime story before." Mark chuckled. "Well, I guess it's time to start a new tradition." He pulled out a book he had picked up earlier that day. "I'll love you forever." As he began reading, Emily snuggled into her pillow, listening to his voice. Halfway through the story, her eyelids started to droop. Before she drifted off, she whispered, "I love you, Dad." Mark leaned down and kissed her forehead. "I love you too, sweetheart. Always." Life wasn't perfect, but it was filled with love. Mark was there for every school play, every scraped knee, every late-night talk. He taught Emily how to ride a bike, how to fish, and how to believe in herself. And on her 12th birthday, Emily asked Mark for one more gift. "I want to change my middle name," she said shyly. "Can it be Mark?" Mark's eyes filled with tears as he pulled her into a hug. "That's the best gift you could ever give me, Emily." And so, she became Emily Mark Parker, a daughter by choice, a daughter by love, a daughter forever.